U.S. Navy needs smaller aircraft carriers than most advanced supercarriers. The supercarrier still has its place in America's arsenal, but naval aviation and naval warfare have changed since its genesis during the early decades of the Cold War. Since then, the supercarrier has become grossly expensive to construct, with the first of the new Ford-class supercarrier costing roughly $13 billion, without research and development included. The second carrier in the class, the USS John F. Kennedy, CVN-79, is slated to cost roughly $11.5 billion. At the same time, the carrier air wing has shrunk from nearly 90 aircraft during the 1980s down to around 65. In addition, precision-guided munitions have allowed one strike fighter to reliably take out multiple targets on a single mission, instead of an entire air wing going after a single strategic target or small set of targets in a single alpha strike in single day. With all this in mind, the Navy's demand to build ever larger aircraft carriers is counterproductive and may be unsustainable in the long term. Nuclear supercarriers are also extremely costly to operate, and their availability is based around a highly rigid and complex timetable. The recent carrier gap has proven just how little elasticity there is in America's all-supercarrier force. A mix of supercarriers and smaller carriers in the 65,000-ton class would allow for a more flexible overall aircraft carrier force, with greater strike capacity being able to be deployed on short notice. For instance, if the Navy were to replace every third Nimitz-class supercarrier with two smaller carriers, let's use a license-built Catawba version of the Royal Navy's Queen Elizabeth-class aircraft carriers for instance, the fleet would eventually be made up of 8 supercarriers and 8 smaller carriers, for 16 in total. Or replace every fourth supercarrier with 2 smaller carriers, which would result in a fleet of 9 supercarriers and 6 smaller carriers, for 15 in total. That is based on modifying current mandate for 12 supercarriers. You can play with the numbers as you like, but even cutting America's supercarrier force to 10 ships, while adding 4 smaller carriers, would be a worthwhile endeavor. Under such a plan, supercarriers can also have their schedules better adjusted for concentrating on deployments and projecting power abroad, instead of executing more menial tasks like training new naval aviators or keeping up fleet air crews carrier qualifications. The smaller carriers could be made available for these tasks, and would expand America's ability to rapidly deploy naval power as need be along a far less rigid schedule. As to whether conventional or nuclear propulsion would be used for these smaller vessels is up for debate, but there are benefits to both. Regardless, increasing the Navy's carrier fleet density should be more important than its magnitude. And even if these ships run on nuclear power, they will create more overall carrier availability at any given time. Some may say that the Navy should just procure America-class amphibious assault ships that are currently being produced to support the growing F-35B fleet. This is also a possibility, but their sortie rates cannot approach anywhere near those of a Catawba carrier, nor can the overall capabilities of their air wing. Even the F-35B lacks the 2,000 pounds class internal weapons carrying capabilities of their counterparts. Still, this would be a very cost-effective alternative to continuing with an all-supercarrier strategy, and the U.S. Navy is already working on its plans to deploy the America-class in Lightning carrier configuration, where nearly 24 F-35Bs would be deployed aboard at one time. The America-class could be further modified to support F-35 strike fighter operations as the Navy would have no need for the spaces set aside for the current design's embarked Marine contingent. As such, hangar space could be further expanded, and fuel capacity. Although under such a plan, the U.S. Navy would have to procure the F-35B with its short takeoff and vertical landing capabilities, but that may actually be a good thing when paired with the strategy. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe.